White House. Do you have more information, Bill?
Frank, I wish I could clear up the confusion. We understand that Deputy White House News Secretary Larry Speakes is on his way into the press room to try and clarify the situation. As we reported a few minutes ago, David Prosperi, a member of the White House press staff, said that Brady had died. But now, as you know, from the hospital, Lynn Nofsinger apparently says that is not true. We are hoping that when Mr. Speakes gets here to the press room, we will be able to find out why this confusion exists. Speakes has been in the White House Situation Room, which is serving as the clearinghouse for the official information, and presumably would have definite word. But as I say, the report that was issued earlier come from a member of Brady's staff, and we can only report what he had to say to us. So, as I said a moment ago, we're now waiting for Larry Speakes to come here to the press room from the Situation Room, which is a floor below us here in the White House, and tell us just what is happening. Frank?
Thank you, Bill. Again, I must apologize for the tenuous nature of the information that is coming to us, but we did have word from a White House official about James Brady, and then we've had another conflicting report, so we'll just hold it in abeyance and pray that he is still alive, and hope that we can get it straight. Ted Koppel has now joined me. Ted, I guess everybody is going to be remembering exactly where they were at about 2:30 this afternoon when the word came. Do you have any further information? I know you've been back here talking to our people around the phone.
In fact, I think one of the reasons that they want me to be sitting here is so that you're not put in the awkward position of people talking into your ear at one point, and this way, while one of us is talking, the other one of us can be getting a little bit of information. In fact, the only additional information, and I should emphasize, as Frank has been doing all afternoon, that we really do not have certain information on the condition of any of the men involved. But since there has been such confusion over Jim Brady's condition and indeed apparently premature reports of his death, we have a report from one of the nurses on the floor that Mr. Brady was still in surgery. Now, that may be wrong, too, and we're in this terribly awkward position of trying to give you information on the one hand as quickly as we get it, but on the other hand as accurately as possible.
Well, here is a wire service report, Ted, that simply says, it's a bulletin. All three networks reported Monday that White House Press Secretary James Brady died from bullet wounds suffered in an attempt on President Reagan's life. White House aide Lynn Nofsinger, and, quote, emphatically denied the report. So again, we must apologize if we are passing along information that is not confirmed, but naturally there is great concern. We're certainly not trying to to be first with the news. This is not one of those situations where there is any real urge to try to beat anybody to anything. We want to get it straight, and it was the White House, a White House official who told us about Mr. Brady, and so we reported it. As a matter of fact, earlier, when I first got the word, Ted, about the name of the young man who's been taken into custody, all I had was a name, and I didn't want to just blurt it out until finally the Secret Service did confirm.
Well, you know, the White House, too, you remember Larry Speakes came out before and said he was going to come out every 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, and as a matter of fact, he's going to be coming out even as we speak. So let's switch over to the White House now, and Acting White House Press Secretary Larry Speakes.
Let me say, to start with, that I will not be able to answer any questions. I'm essentially confirming what's been said from the hospital. The president is still in surgery and will be for a while, but the doctors in a preliminary report to Mrs. Reagan have just assured her that his condition remains good. As far as the report about Jim Brady, it is untrue, and he is in serious condition. Thank you.
All right. That is Larry Speakes, who said that the report on Jim Brady is untrue, that he is in serious condition. He reported that the information actually that had been given out by the White House and which we subsequently relayed to you was incorrect. So they're all obviously upset, distraught, I suppose, to some degree. And somehow or other, the incorrect information was given to the White House. The White House passed it along to us, and we naturally, reluctantly, had to report it. But we are now happy, if that is the right word, to tell you that the report is untrue, that Jim Brady is said to be, his condition is very serious, but he is still alive. President, still in surgery, has been for some time. The doctors, what was the term he used, Ted, have assured Mrs. Reagan.
Very good
that his
condition.
Very good, did he
Very,
say?
I didn't take the note down because I was listening to you, as a matter of fact, but I think that the president's condition is very good, and that Mrs. Reagan had been assured of that. But the point we're both making is that everyone, the White House and, of course, all the media covering this as it's happening, is trying to walk this tightrope between giving you information as quickly as we possibly can and at the same time trying to ascertain that that information is as accurate as it could possibly be. Susan King is standing by now in the briefing room at the White House. Susan?
We're not hearing Susan. Can we make another attempt now to get her microphone in working order, or is there just a small technical problem? Susan, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can, Frank, if you
All
can
right,
hear
go
me.
ahead. Yes, start over if you would, please.
Surely. As you might imagine, the mood here is very somber, and people, all those who we are getting our information from, are not only the subordinates of, but good friends of Jim Brady, which is why there probably is a real hesitation here, and people are holding their breath moment by moment. There's no doubt about it that Jim Brady is in very serious condition. As most of us know at this point, he was hit in the temple by a gunshot wound, and that is very serious. His wife was called by the White House immediately after and went to the hospital. He is in very serious condition, and so it's a moment-by-moment watch, and people here are just extremely upset, acting mighty professional, I must admit. He also has an 18-year-old daughter who is in college and who learned through the radio and television reports and was called later. He has a young son, 5 years old, also, who, of course, is home with his wife now. The situation here remains pretty much the same. The people who are in the know are in the Situation Room. You probably heard us talking about that a number of times. That is a special area in the White House in the basement, which is equipped with the most modern communication, ultimate connection to all people internationally and nationally, and where the situation of any crisis is monitored. Right now, the top cabinet officials are there, as well as those who are advisors to Vice President Bush, who of course is on his way back, and Larry Speakes, who is the Assistant Press Secretary, who will be briefing us here, trying to keep us up moment to moment. If you have just tuned in, you have learned from Mr. Speakes, in fact, who said that the president is still in surgery, but doctors have told Mrs. Reagan that the situation is good. The children are all expected to come to Washington, if they're not all here, during the evening. White House communications and travel personnel are making arrangements for them to come here. And Mr. Speakes said, at this point, it is untrue that Jim Brady has died. He just said he is in serious condition, but the reports of his death are untrue. Just one, perhaps more light moment, Lynn Nofziger, who was the press secretary during the campaign for the president and who's been with him for many, many years, brought in perhaps some of the humor that the president looks at. He said that as the president saw Paul Laxalt, the senator who advised him for many years, he said, don't worry about me, I'll make it. The president, known for his one-liners, also told Deaver and Meese as he was being rolled past them, hey, who's minding the store? And he said to doctors as he's wheeled into surgery, I hope you're all Republicans. That's one thing about the president. He does have a sense of humor at every moment, no matter how critical, politically or personally. Frank?
Thank you very much, Susan. Yes, he's supposed to have said to Mrs. Reagan, honey, I forgot to duck. His supply of one-liners is apparently inexhaustible.
Unlimited.
Go ahead, Ted. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and again, I'm going to have to attribute this because it's Mutual Radio that's saying it, but they quote an unnamed hospital doctor saying that the bullet missed the president's heart by an inch. Of course, the key word there is missed, but struck him in the left chest, and I guess the reports that the lung has collapsed.
It's not been confirmed, Ted. We had a report that one lung had partially collapsed. That was quite early in the afternoon. Very shortly after the incident, a doctor at George Washington University Hospital told us that. We realize now that there are millions of people just coming home and perhaps learning of this incident for the first time, who have not seen the tape that we have run many times this afternoon ever since 2:30, but we want to show it to you again. Is it going to be in slow motion? The president came out of the Washington Hilton Hotel at 2:30, approximately 2:30 this afternoon, after delivering a speech to the Building Trades Council of the AFL-CIO. You'll see him emerge in a moment with the chief of the Secret Service detail right alongside him, waving to the crowd. We've slowed this tape down. And we'll see Michael Deaver come right into full camera view in just a moment and turn right toward the camera. Here he comes now. The president puts his arm down, raises his left arm.
This agent, Frank, you see the agent who's turning to face us, he gets hit. He's one of the agents...
That's right, he's hit. Yes, yes, down he goes. That's Tim McCarthy. At least that was the identification that I was given earlier.
That's correct. So he, in fact, was right by the president's side when the attack took place.
And in the line of fire.
And in the line of fire. Timothy J. McCarthy.
McCarthy, yes.
And it's McCarthy whom you see lying prone on the sidewalk there. And although all of this is taking place in slow motion, the extraordinary thing about it, and having seen it as you have, Frank, several times now, is the extreme speed with which the Secret Service acted. I mean, you've said it before, and I suppose it bears repeating, that when someone is prepared to put their own life on the line to attack the president, there is literally nothing short of locking the president up in a vault in the basement of the White House that can be done to completely defend him. But they were doing exactly what they are supposed to do. They were right next to the president. Indeed, one of the Secret Service agents took a bullet that presumably was meant for the president.
Yes, he was in the line of fire and between the president and the gun. What you see here now are police and Secret Service agents swarming around the suspect.
Now, here's a picture of Hinckley. He is the alleged assailant.
That's a driver's license picture, I'm told. Earlier I was given to understand that he did not have a driver's license. But anyway, that's the first look we've had at John Warnock Hinckley, 22 years old, of Evergreen, Colorado. He is under arrest and is in custody, and it is believed, at least by the police, they took him into custody right after the shooting. He is the man who fired the shots that wounded the president, wounded James Brady, who was in critical condition, wounded a Secret Service agent, and wounded a District of Columbia policeman, a man named Delahanty.
You know, these reports, Frank, well, it's not really any further information except that it's part of the continuing litany of reactions that's going to be coming in throughout the rest of the evening. This one from Tip O'Neill, the House Majority Leader. I am shocked that this has happened, and I join all Americans in praying for the president and others who were injured. That again from Tip O'Neill.
I mentioned a moment ago the policeman, the District of Columbia policeman Thomas K. Delahanty. He is 45 years old. He is in serious condition now with wounds, according to this wire service report, in the shoulder and neck. He had first been listed in critical condition, but now he is said to be in serious condition. And the Secret Service agent, Tim McCarthy, we understand, is doing better. Jim Brady is in critical condition, and we're waiting word on the President of the United States, who at last report from the White House was still in surgery at George Washington Hospital. We are going to stay on the air right here until we are satisfied that the President's condition can be confirmed, and until we get a report from the hospital and we get this story finally wrapped up. So we just want to alert all our stations along the way that events are, excuse me, fast breaking. We almost instantaneously get late word from either the George Washington University Hospital or from the White House press room, and we're naturally going to stay right on the air in order to bring you whatever information comes into us.
All right, the latest information now comes from Kay Warner, who is acting as a spokesman for the Brady family. That's Jim Brady, the White House spokesman. And she says that Brady would undergo surgery, which is expected to take between 3 to 5 hours. Now, of course, we're under the impression that the surgery is already underway, and I have a feeling that it must be. But very serious surgery. Those earlier reports, and again, some of you may have been coming back and forth, those earlier reports that Jim Brady had passed away, fortunately not true, but he is in very grave condition and apparently undergoing surgery that will be quite prolonged. The president is still undergoing surgery, is that right? As of the last word that we got?
5:25, Ted, which is what? A little more than 10 minutes ago, Larry Speaks came out in the White House press room and said the president is still in surgery, and he said then that the doctors have assured Mrs. Reagan that the president's condition is good. We understand that there was first exploratory surgery carried out to determine whether there had been any abdominal injury, and it was determined that none had occurred, and then the chest surgery was undertaken in order to locate and remove the bullets. Hold on just a moment. All right, we have a tape now of a reporter who was given some information at the hospital. It was on the third floor apparently when people were brought in. Let's roll the tape.
The two Secret Service agents. We went upstairs. I got all the way upstairs where Brady was being taken care of.
What time?
This was about 2:30, 3 o'clock, about 3 o'clock when I was up there. The doctors took Mrs. Brady aside and a couple of White House aides and briefed her on Brady's condition. I used the telephone and got thrown out by an agent and was moved around the hall, and I happened to walk to a room and looked in, and there was Jim Brady on a table being worked on. It was in what they call the head scan room. This is where they do the CAT scans of the brain. This is the computerized picture of the brain which shows the damage done to Mr. Brady's forehead and the brain area. I found an intern up there who had just responded and who got in his area, the radiology area, to see that brain scan and to see the CAT pictures. He said the bullet entered Mr. Brady's brain just above the right eye, did extensive damage to the brain. The prognosis is not good. The head of, beg pardon? What he said to you, sir? He says, as a doctor, he said, it is not good. He said, I have nothing official, but he said, few people survive such a wound, and he would go no further than that. He'd rather not have his name used because he's on the staff. He was able to float freely and get my questions answered and get back in. He did not want to be identified, except to say that the senior medical officer in charge of both Brady's situation and the president's situation was a friend of his, so he could move in and out of those areas. What did he tell you about the president? He said the president had been shot just to the left side of the lung, of the left lung. The bullet missed the heart by about 1 inch. It caused some damage in that area to some of the arteries and some of the blood vessels, caused that area to fill with blood. So when the president came in, they immediately inserted chest tubes and began to extract through suction that blood and mucus that accumulated. He said that the president at 4 o'clock Eastern Time was wheeled into the surgical area, and the surgery began. It's a procedure they call thoracotomy, which is nothing more than open chest surgery. I asked him how long it will take. It could take as long as 4 hours or as short as 1. He said, we won't know until we get inside and assess the damage that has been done to that area. He said, the real problem here, I don't know. I don't know who's doing the surgery. He said he was wheeled in approximately 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and that's when the surgery began shortly afterwards. I do know that 30 units of O-negative blood were rushed up to the presidential operating area for use. They cross-matched the president's blood before they wheeled him up. He will be on a respirator during surgery because the problem you have here is much like flying a twin-engine plane. You've got a problem on the right engine, you feather it, meaning his left lung is collapsed. The right lung now has to do double duty. And the people that I've talked to said it's a very fine line. They've got to oxygenate the right lung and keep it fully inflated while they assess the damage done to the left lung area. They will introduce some blood clotting agents into the bloodstream to try to assist in stemming the blood flow. If that doesn't work, the doctor told me they've got a real problem. But he said there's no reason to believe now that they can't repair the damage done to him.
Up until the time of the surgery, was the president conscious, and did he make any statements of any kind?
I do not know. I don't know of his status. I was outside the scan room when Jim Brady was wheeled out. The only sign of life I could see as Jim Brady went past was a portable EKG unit on the foot of his stretcher, which showed a good, strong heartbeat. It was not a very pretty sight to see.
Is the president going to shock?
I don't know, but the doctor spoke of a traumatic situation. He said, I asked him about the chances of survival for the president. He said that in a situation like this, you've got a 70-year-old man who is admittedly in good condition, but were it just a cyst that had to be removed in open chest surgery, it would be serious enough. The fact that he has a bullet wound and a traumatic wound and causing the lung to collapse, this complicates the problem. It's not insurmountable, but it is serious. And they would say no more beyond that. They wouldn't give me a condition report or anything else.
Is in surgery now?
Beg pardon?
Any idea how many bullets?
In the president, they only talked of one bullet. And I don't know whether it exited the back or was still in his body. They didn't speak of that. They didn't know.
Did you see or hear anything from the First Lady? Was she with
I didn't see her. I was thrown off of that suite area at 4:20, and I was told they were closing the hospital at 4:20. There would be no more people allowed in that area at all.
How do you spell your last name?
S-I-M-P-S-O-N. First name Ross, R-O-S-S. Mutual Broadcasting System.
Recap the beginning. We didn't get to the beginning.
Beg your pardon?
All the information about both Brady and the president from the one intern?
No, the information I got was from a staff member at the hospital who is friends with the senior medical officer in charge of the operation. He was a doctor. He was a doctor. And the man who saw the CAT scan was an intern who was assigned to that department and heard about it and was able to penetrate his department and to see the scans. I will tell you this, that the medical officer in charge of that scan room, I spoke to him twice and he would give me nothing, but I overheard a conversation when he came out and he instructed the people who made the actual photographs of Brady's head to make additional copies and seal them and put them in a safe because he said we're going to need those down the road at a later date. He did not elaborate.
Who actually worked on the president?
No. The information I got was simply secondhand, and that was, again, from this officer who, medical officer, this doctor, who had been able to go in and talk to people who had worked on the president and said that, you know, he was on the respirator, it was facilitating his breathing, that he was taken into surgery at about 4 o'clock Eastern Time.
The result of the wound was a collapsed lung?
The bullet passed 1 inch from the heart. The bullet passed on the left side of the lung, 1 inch from the heart, and caused bleeding from the side of the lung to the outer body wall. And that caused the lung to collapse. It just simply deflated it. This is the doctor whose friend was the senior medical officer there, and he was the one who said that this is how close it came to it. No, he did not, you know, identify him or himself. Beg pardon? I don't know. This was on, the CAT scan room was 1310, so I assume it was 3rd floor. And I'm told, I asked on the way out if Reagan and Brady were being operated on in the same area. They said, well, the OR, they have adjoining suites there. It could very possibly be in the same area, although not in the same room. And they didn't know whether it was they were on 2 or on 3. Now, the other fellow told me that Reagan was on 3 and so was Brady, because Brady was taken down around one side of the cubicle, and Reagan was apparently taken out a side door and down the other side of the aisle where we couldn't see him. For Brady? The intern who saw the CAT scans, the pictures of Brady's cranium and the skull area, said that the prognosis was not good. The pictures did not look good. There was just too much damage in the cranium and the brain area, and that was as far as he would go. I was behind Mrs. Brady as she went up, and she kept asking just a battery of questions. How's Jim? How's Jim? Where's the president? Where is this? Where is that? And they finally got her. No, she was very, very calm. A surgeon came out and sat down at the end of the hall about 10 feet away and was, you know, gestating to her, showing her, you know, what was happening, what they were trying to do to him. And at that point, she began crying, just very, very lightly. A lady was with her. I assume one of the White House staff was there. And they were taken to a room just down from the scan room. And that's where she is, as far as I know.
Did you see if Brady was in surgery or not?
Brady's in surgery. Beg pardon? I don't know. I've heard live reports, and I just don't know. Beg pardon, Chris? I got it secondhand, and this came from a staff member at the hospital whose friend attended the president, and he told him, beg pardon? He didn't want his name used. Beg pardon?
The friend of the staff member is a doctor.
Yes, he is a doctor, and he's on staff at the hospital.
And everything you have told us, the source of it is this person.
Is from him, and
With the
then
exception of the interim and the CAT scan.
the CAT scan, yes. No, I saw a picture of it from about 10 feet. I could not tell. It was shadowed, so you don't have backlight, so you can't tell. Who? I didn't inquire further than that. I saw no members of the clergy up on the operating floor.
If you could please be seated, Lynn Alsinger's en route over here now to do the first briefing. Everyone could please be...
All right, well, you've just seen the tape. I need to kind of put it in perspective again. That man is Ross Simpson of Mutual Broadcasting. He was on the 3rd floor of George Washington Hospital here in Washington when both the president and Mr. Brady and the Secret Service agent and the Washington policeman were apparently all brought in. And just to summarize what he said, which again is based on second-hand testimony that he has from a doctor who gave it to him. He would not identify the doctor by name. Basically, it boils down to this. The president seems to be doing well. However, the doctor pointed out he is, albeit in excellent condition, nevertheless a 70-year-old man. And they're engaging in major surgery on him right now. So the president's condition good, but guarded. As for the condition of Jim Brady, quoting, this is Ross Simpson of Mutual now, quoting the surgeon, the prognosis is not good. Few people survive such a wound.
Let me just point out, if I may, one other thing that we should remind them. That was a videotape that we just saw. And at 5:25, this afternoon, less than about half an hour or so ago, we had a direct report from the White House, from Larry Speaks, that the president was still in surgery, but the doctors then had assured Mrs. Reagan that his condition is good. That's really the last official word that we've had.
All right, again, we have another piece of tape now, this of the alleged assailant, John W. Hinckley, as he was being brought to D.C. Police Headquarters. You will see him, I am told, in the second car. There's the first one, so watch this next car coming onto your screen right now. This, again, is videotape. He was being brought over to D.C. Police Headquarters.
Shortly after 2:30 this afternoon.
That's the picture of Hinckley's driver's license. If you were able to see anything, you're a little bit faster than I was. I didn't see a thing. I saw 2 cars coming through the rain. It's been drizzling here most of the afternoon in Washington, but Hinckley is now over at D.C. Police Headquarters. He is from Evergreen, Colorado, 22 years old, and he is the man who allegedly took, what, 4 or 5 shots now, Frank? Have they decided on the number?
I'm sorry, Ted, I was being told something else in my ear.
Well,
Go ahead.
anyway,
No, that's all right.
4 or 5 shots.
At least, well, we know at least 4. And we had pictures earlier of one damage to the presidential limousine. So we know that it must have been at least 5, and quite possibly 6 shots that were fired.
And it was a 22 caliber handgun.
Earlier reports that it was 38 caliber, and then subsequently it was said that it was probably a 22. We also had a report earlier, Ted, from a Secret Service spokesman who said it appears that the alleged assailant, John Warnock Hinckley, acted alone. The implication is that there was no conspiracy or that there was nobody else involved, but of course it's quite early to make any kind of a judgment about motivation or the circumstances of the shooting this afternoon. We understand now that our correspondent Tom Shell is standing by in Sherman Oaks, California, the home of Michael Reagan, the eldest son of President Reagan. Hello, Tom. Go ahead.
Frank, we have been here now for about 3 hours. Michael Reagan arrived just 15 minutes ago. We had conflicting reports as to whether he was even in the house, but a Secret Service car with Michael Reagan in sped up here 15 minutes ago, and he hurriedly rushed into the house. We assume that he is getting ready to take off to Washington. Activity here has been pretty slow much of the afternoon. There's been 4 or 5 people arrive at the house, people that we did not recognize. We understood that one is a business associate of Michael Reagan's, but his son, 2.5-year-old Cameron, did sneak out of the house out a back door at about a half an hour after we arrived here. The boy came around, toddled down the driveway. The Secret Service corralled him and then took him back in the house after letting him look at all of the reporters who have gathered out here. There's probably a group of 30 or 40 of us who have gathered here outside Michael Reagan's house. We've had no comment from inside the house at all. Michael Reagan, as we said, was in a great rush when he got here, just ran into the house in through the back door, and we have not had any chance to question him so far. Frank?
To question him about either, is there?
No, I was about to say I suspect that Michael Reagan is probably sitting there watching television and
Yes.
trying to get the information even as we're trying to give it to all of you.
Sure. He really has had a great time during the campaign, during the political campaign. He used to go out and speak for his father. He didn't accompany him, but he, on the campaign plane itself. But he would go out and have a grand time giving speeches. He didn't do it very extensively, but he kind of liked it. Always seemed to enjoy it. Well, we have nothing really to tell you at 8 minutes to 6, except that the President of the United States, so far as we know, is still in surgery. He was shot on the left side of the chest this afternoon at shortly after 2:30 in Washington, as he came out of a hotel after delivering an address to the Building Trades Council of the AFL-CIO. Also wounded with the President, and more grievously than Mr. Reagan apparently, was Jim Brady, the White House press secretary, who suffered a head wound and is described as in very critical condition. A Secret Service agent, Tim McCarthy, was also hurt, and he is said to be in better condition, and a District of Columbia police officer named Delahanty, John Delahanty, I believe it is said to be in serious condition. So there have been 4 people wounded here this afternoon, including the President of the United States. And we wait now for word from the hospital, really, from George Washington University Hospital, where they all were taken, for further word on the condition of all of them.
Frank, I'd just like to inject 2 points. One, we have a comment from former President Gerald Ford, who himself, as you were saying earlier, was once the victim of an attempted assassination.
2, really. Yeah.
2, that's right, although he was unhurt in either one of them. A spokesman, Bob Barrett, for the former president, said that Ford expressed grave concern for the president and his personal support for Mrs. Reagan, and that former President Ford will continue to monitor the situation. One other thing I just wanted to mention at this point, because it is one of the truly, if there is anything positive to be said about a situation like this, it is how the Republic continues to function, and function in a very orderly fashion. The man who would stand in for President Reagan, if that was necessary, and it's not always necessary that the president be totally incapacitated. You remember back in the 1950s when Vice President Richard Nixon stood in for then ailing President Dwight Eisenhower. That man, George Bush, the vice president, is on his way back here to Washington. Should be arriving, what, at about an hour from Texas?
About 6:30, we're told, about 35 minutes.
All right, so about 35 minutes from now, and he, of course, will then be in a position to take over the constitutional duties of president, but that decision has not yet been made. All he would be doing is taking over the job to which he was appointed, in fact, just a few days ago, and that seemed like such an enormous story earlier last week when there was the struggle between Al Haig and George Bush, who would be taking over the crisis unit. Well, of course, we are in the middle of a crisis right now, and George Bush will be taking that role when he arrives here in Washington. In the interim, the next man constitutionally behind the Vice President, the Secretary of State, Alexander Haig, is at the White House and has been at the White House all afternoon, also monitoring the situation and being in marginal control I say marginal only because the president himself is still in literal control of the country. The man who took the videotapes that you've been watching time and again this afternoon, one of our cameramen, Hank Brown, is in a studio downstairs, and we're going to have an opportunity to talk to him now and he was possibly one of the closest eyewitnesses to what was going on this
I think the
afternoon.
bullets had to go right by him, Ted. The gunman had to be right behind him.
Well, there's Hank
true?
right now.
Hank, wasn't he behind you and to your right?
The gunman was to my right. He was on the press line. He was about the third person over from me at that particular time.
Did you, was there any reason at all for him to attract your attention before the president came out?
We had a lot of problems earlier for the arrival. There were ordinary people up on the press line, and we thought that was cleared out when we came out for the departure, and it was not. There were a lot of people up there. It was about maybe 50 to 60 people there.
They were, you mean in an area that what you believed had been set aside for the press?
That's correct.
But citizens who were not members of the press
That's
wandered
correct.
in
It was
there.
not secured. It was the average citizen there up on the press line.
Did you notice this fellow at all, Hank?
I did not notice the fellow at all, no. I didn't notice him until the shots rung out.
Hank, all of us at one time or another, of course, have covered stories like this and have covered the president, and normally the Secret Service and the police are rather cautious about isolating the press, isolating the cameramen, making sure that that everyone has their IDs prominently displayed. Why not in this case? Do you have any sense that, that there was any laxness at all?
It was, the press line was set up. We set up on the press line, and the people engulfed us. Once we set up there, they moved a few people back, but they did not move all the people back. And it was just a mob of people there. It was totally unusual, and it usually never happens. They usually have us separated from the rest of the public.
When did you, Hank, when did you first become aware of the fact that there was actually an attempt on the president? You seemed to react very, very quickly. The Secret Service seemed to react very, very quickly, but there must have been that moment of wondering what was going on.
Well, the president, as soon as the president appeared out of the presidential door of the Hilton, the crowd applauded and cheers and everything was loud and very exuberant for the president. He turned and he waved, he smiled. He was dead center in front of my camera at that particular time. He was put in one more wave, one more smile, was bending over to get into the presidential limousine when shots rung out. There were rapid fire, 4 shots rapidly fired, and that's when everyone was, Secret Service, police officers, were falling all over the place. And I was at the time going down trying to get some area of security for myself, and as I turned is when the press secretary was going down, but he was more or less taking cover at the time. When I turned the direction of the shots, that's when the Secret Service also grabbed the gunman, and the gun went off about 2 more times, and I believe that's when the press secretary was hit. He was no more than about 5 feet away from the gunman at the time.
You can review the tape, Hank. We've shown it many, many times this afternoon, and I know you'll have an opportunity to see it. Did you have the impression, I know you reacted instinctively, of course, when you heard these shots and saw this commotion, but you moved your camera immediately to your right where the police and the Secret Service were swarming all over this assailant. Did you have the impression at the time that the president was all right? I mean, that they just bundled him into the car and pushed him away? Here is the tape now, Hank, your tape.
This is where he was waving. He turned to wave to the people, and he was about to get, that's when the shots fired. Right there, you can't see it in this shot, they had the gun on the ground and were kicking it over about right there, and that's right down there to your left, right in front of the Secret Service agent is Bradley, and that's where he was shot in the head.
Now that gun, Hank, that we see, I think, a little bit later, lying right by Jim Brady's head, that then is the gun that was used in the attack?
Yes, that's correct.
It was kicked over there by...
It was kicked over there by one of the agents.
Yeah. Now this is Mr. Brady now, Jim Brady in the foreground here. The police officer is standing right there, is lying on the ground right next to him. The top of the picture is the Secret Service.
That's Brady right there, and there's the weapon.
That's the weapon.
It may be the officer's weapon, because the officer was turning to fire and was turning to draw his gun, and he was immediately hit.
Or the agent, yeah. Or the policeman, yes. Yes. We are... The man that they are subduing here has been identified as John Warnock Hinckley, 22 years old, of Evergreen, Colorado. What you're watching is a videotape. We've just received word that Howard Baker, Senator Howard Baker of Tennessee, says that the president is still in surgery. That's the last word we had 35 minutes ago from the White House. And according to Senator Baker, the president will be in surgery a while longer.
Well, as we heard that reporter from Mutual Radio quoting a doctor as saying that this kind of surgery can last as long as 4 hours. So
we're unable to pinpoint with certainty exactly when the president went in, but I believe it was before 4 o'clock into surgery, 3:45 or so. So he's been in there for more than 2 hours now. At this time, ordinarily, at least some of our stations around the country will be watching ABC's World News Tonight, which is not going to be seen tonight because we're going to stay right on the air with this story that is, of course, of supreme concern to us all now while we're waiting to find out the condition of the president and the others who were wounded in the assassination attempt this afternoon. Might also point out that the Academy Awards, which were scheduled to be telecast tonight, have been postponed for at least 24 hours and will not be telecast. The Oscars will not be handed out tonight and not until tomorrow. The situation at the moment, the president is in surgery, has been for, according to our calculation, more than 2 hours. Doctors removing a bullet that afflicted him or struck him this afternoon as he came out of the Washington Hilton Hotel. Ted, Secretary of State Haig was careful to point out earlier, it seems quite a long time ago now when he made his one appearance in the press room, that no alert was anticipated, none had been ordered. I wonder if that, of course you can't say what is customary in situations of this kind, but I always kind of assumed that there would be a sort of one stage of heightened readiness.
I have a feeling that that something like that has probably happened, but again, there's no reason to believe that anyone other than and we have to keep saying it. If it sounds cumbersome, our apologies, but the alleged assailant, John W. Hinckley, there is no reason to believe that anyone else was involved or that any foreign. All right, I'm sorry. I'm being told that Dr. Dominic DeMeo, who was a former medical examiner in the city of New York, is now standing by. The chief medical examiner of the city of New York, Dr. DeMeo, is now standing by in our New York studios. And perhaps Dr. DeMeo would be good enough to, on the basis of what you have heard, Doctor, to give us some sense of what this procedure is that the president is undergoing right now and what his possible dangers are.
From what I gather, it must be a small caliber bullet that entered the left thoracic cavity. Somehow, there must have been a suspicion that the bullet traveled not only through the lower portion of the left lung, as I indicate on the chart, but it went possibly through the diaphragm into the abdominal cavity.
Is that, Doctor, what would cause the lung to collapse then?
Yes, when the bullet strikes the lung, it causes a hole and permits air to escape into the what we call a pleural space. It's an empty or potential empty space around the lung. The air will compress the lung. In addition to it, there will be a certain amount of blood to compress the lung. But what concerns me most is why they had to undertake an exploratory laparotomy, which they may feel that the bullet continued through the diaphragm into one of the vital organs of the abdominal cavity. That has not been thoroughly explored or explained.
Doctor, you've got to realize you're dealing with a large audience of laypersons here, and we don't know one of these organs from another, so if you'd be good enough to identify them as you show us what you're talking about here.
Well, this organ I'm pointing to now is the lung. If the bullet would strike in a downward fashion this way, it would go through the lung and through this red area, which is the diaphragm that separates the heart and lungs from the abdominal cavity, which contains your liver, your stomach, your small and large bowel. Also, when you look behind the specimen, you will see that there's a purplish organ here that we call a spleen, so that if the bullet came through here, it could go through the lung, through the diaphragm. If the stomach is distended, through the stomach, it can go through the spleen, and then you could barely see it unless you remove the entire specimen. But if I turn it, you could see the kidney in the back, so that the bullet, if it's a high-velocity, small-caliber bullet, can travel quite a distance, providing it doesn't hit a hard object such as a piece of bone.
Dr. DeMaio, may I ask you, sir, on the basis of your knowledge, would someone who had suffered an injury and perhaps had a vital organ struck by a bullet, would that person be conscious, and would he be joking, as from all reports the president was?
As a matter of fact, I've seen people get in their car, drive to the hospital, seeking medical aid and joking right through. It's very possible.
I see, sir.
Dr. DeMaio, of course, the other aspect that has to be taken into account here is the president's age. We're dealing here with a 70-year-old man. What are the dangers?
Well, the dangers would be minimal when you consider a good anesthesiologist, you consider a good internist to evaluate his cardiovascular system, and he has the proper support. Today, age means absolutely nothing. We're operating on people 90 or better, and they manage to survive extensive operations. Age is not a factor here.
With the understanding, Dr. DeMaio, that you're speaking obviously from second-hand knowledge, what is the procedure, do you believe, that the president is now undergoing?
Well, the thoracotomy would mean that they open his chest cavity to see exactly what damage the bullet did to the lung, and to see if it penetrated other vital organs. They have to see if the bullet traveled down into the abdominal cavity, but if it's restricted essentially to the lung, then you will find that the outcome is very, very good. You should have no difficulty.
All right, Dr. DeMaio, if you would stand by for a moment, please. Frank, you've got some lead information.
Well, I want to get some more information. I think we've got it now. We can go to our correspondent on Capitol Hill, because we understand that Senator Baker has just received a phone call from Paul Laxalt, who's at the hospital. Britt Hume, can you come in now? Oh, we don't have him. I'm sorry. All right, I'll tell you what I believe Britt reported just a moment ago, Ted, while you were talking with the doctor. Britt reported that Senator Baker said that the president is still in surgery and is expected to remain there for about an hour. But very well. The intensive care unit of the hospital after he comes out. Senator Baker is also quoted as saying, recovery is certain, and I assume that that is what he was told by Senator Laxalt. Well, now we have Britt Hume in position. Britt, tell me, are we correct on that? Is that what Senator Baker said?
Well, Frank, just elaborating a little bit on that good news that you just gave. Senator Baker, after a recess of almost 3 hours, has just reconvened the Senate, and he announced this based on what Senator Laxalt and other White House representatives who were down at the hospital told him, that the president is indeed still in surgery and expects to come out of surgery in about an hour, and he will be moved to the hospital's intensive care unit. But apparently, these are Senator Baker's words, that he hears that the president is doing very well, and he adds, his recovery is considered to be certain. So that, of course, is the best news that we've heard yet on the president's condition. The Senate, by the way, Frank, is only going to be in recess for just only going to be in session for just a few moments. They're about to recess for the day. Senator Jack Danforth, the Republican senator from Missouri, who is also an ordained Episcopal clergyman, is going to say a prayer on behalf of the entire Senate for the president's recovery and that of the others injured as well. And that will be it for the day here in the Senate, Frank.
Thank you very much, Britt. Thank you indeed. Well, Senator Baker getting the word from Senator Laxalt, who we must assume is getting it from the doctors.
That's good.
Is Dr. DeMaio, can we call you in again, please, sir, in New York? The senators are hearing from the doctors, apparently, that the president's recovery is considered to be certain. It's our understanding that he's been in surgery for a couple of hours, even more than that now. What do you think about the word that he may be in for another hour or so? Is there anything at all unusual about that?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
As I said before, if they can maintain the vital signs, which means that they keep his blood pressure up, keep a good pulse going, give him the proper medication and good anesthesia, there's no reason why he can't be in the operating room 4 or 5 hours. Evidently, the fact that they predict a good outcome, it means that the injuries to the organs are probably minimum, most likely just the lung, and when they did explore the abdominal cavity, it may be that the bullet was seen on x-ray, but it may have just floated around without necessarily doing any injury to any of the vital organs. But only the x-rays and further explanations will help us on this.
Dr. DeMeo, what happens to a collapsed lung? Is that the kind of thing that generates its own recovery after a period of time?
The lung that collapses will be easily expanded as soon as the hole created by the bullet is healed and the blood is withdrawn, and with proper either exercise from the anesthesiologist or pulmonary therapist could be easily expanded. There'll be no residual effects.
All right, now this is obviously a little bit premature, but then the president's recovery theoretically would be what, a matter of days, weeks, months?
I would say a week to 10 days.
Well, that's certainly good news. May I just ask you, while we have you and your expertise, and I'd just like to point out again that you are the former chief medical examiner of the city of New York, would you give us your analysis, again from a distance, of what happened to Jim Brady? Now, that seems to be a much more serious situation.
Jim Brady, is that the fellow who shot in the head?
Yes, correct, sir, yes.
Unfortunately, this is a small caliber bullet which tends to penetrate the skull and does not exit. Now, where did it penetrate? The front, the side, the back? I don't know. Where did it go in?
Dr. DeMeo, I'm sorry. I don't think we can give you that kind of information with any specificity.
Well,
it looked as though it went in over the right eye.
Well, if it went over the right eye and goes backwards, it destroys a good many of the vital tissues necessary for you to survive. If you do survive, you may be paralyzed. But if it goes from right to left near the temporal regions, you know, near your hairline, it could go right across and just give you what we call a lobotomy. It may change your personality, but it may do absolutely nothing to you.
Well,
also, the bullet could strike the skull and go around the skull in a ricochet way without necessarily damaging the brain. Without knowing what the neurological findings are, it's very difficult to predict his outcome.
All right, well, we certainly don't want to put you in a position of speculating on something about which you know nothing. I should, at this particular point, say that Senator Baker has just addressed the Senate and has told the Senate that the surgeons have found the bullet in President Reagan. So, again, everything on the president's recovery seems to be...
But he did... no sense of any other person being in the neighborhood involved in this?
No, certainly not across the street.
A few moments ago.
There have been reports that clergy had been summoned to the hospital, however, for Mr. Brady, but Lynn Nofsinger was quoted as saying just a short while ago that James Brady was still alive. We simply will have to see on that as the evening goes along. As to President Reagan's condition, the most that can be said is what has been said right along, that the president was hit on the left side by a bullet that entered.
Well, what do we have here?
I don't know. You fooled me every time. It's hard to guess right now. It's not a rug, is it?
No, but it doesn't look like it.
A family father, I believed earlier identified as someone in the oil business. Mr. Hinckley had spent some time in Dallas, Texas, going to high school. Then the entire family returned.
Of line of succession, but I think there was a reluctance on the part of the secretary to even address that possibility or that eventuality. And there was a reluctance on the part of everybody, as there is now, even to talk about it. The Vice President of the United States, however, since that subject has come up, is probably on the approach now to Washington, D.C. He's due to land here within the next half hour or so. And then, of course, he will go immediately to the White House and wait for word. Undoubtedly, the Vice President has received the word, too, that we have received from Senator Baker, The Baker word is that recovery is considered to be certain, and that was relayed to him by Senator Paul Laxalt of Nevada, President Reagan's close friend, who was at the hospital. We have another picture of John Warnock Hinckley, the man who was in custody after the shooting. Here is his high school graduation photograph, is it?
Yes.
Well, it's not clear now, I gather, whether he is 22 or he might be even be 25. This is his driver's license picture, and let's see his high school graduation photograph again. Can we do that? There he is. Good-looking young man.
All right, Frank, forgive me, but Sam Donaldson has got Lynn Nofziger, who is a close friend and associate of President Reagan's, live at the hospital. Let's go to Sam right now.
I'm here at George Washington University Hospital with Lynn Nofziger, a special assistant and close friend of President Reagan's. Mr. Nofziger, what is the latest on the President's condition?
The President's condition is good and is stable. He will be out of surgery shortly. The thing that I went over to tell at the briefing was that there are rumors running around that are not true. He has not had open heart surgery. His condition is good, and he will, as I say, he will be out of surgery shortly.
Could we recapitulate? What can you tell us? What is known about the President's wound and the events that led up to the surgery?
Sam, we cannot do that. We will have a doctor at a briefing in about an hour, and he will go all through that, and I'm just not qualified to do that. He'll be there, and we can do it then.
I understand, but earlier you talked about there being one wound, one bullet. Can you just tell us that?
One wound, one bullet.
Yes, but I'm saying that if there are rumors about open chest surgery are not correct, what is the correct definition?
That's different. What I said is there was not open heart surgery. There was exploratory surgery, obviously, and I really cannot go beyond that until the doctor comes out and briefs.
Our reporter in Capitol Hill, Britt Hume, is just quoting Senator Baker, is saying that he's been told that the President's chances of recovery are excellent. In fact, his recovery is assured, according to Britt Hume's rendition of what Senator Baker said.
The doctors tell us that the President's condition is good and it is stable.
Can you tell us anything about Jim Brady, the press secretary?
He is in surgery, and that is all I can tell you.
Are the other wounded
I can't talk to them at all.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. Lynn Nofziger, a special assistant to the President. The President, of course, went into surgery shortly before 4 o'clock and has been in surgery then for over 2 hours now. Back to you.
Thank you, Sam. And Lynn says that he'll be out of surgery shortly. Because he's had experience as a press secretary during the political campaigns of Mr. Reagan. He stuck right to those two terms that he wants to use. His condition is good and stable, and he would not go beyond that.
And in effect confirming that there has been open chest surgery, but not open heart surgery.
Yeah, I don't know where that rumor started about the open heart surgery, because it was fairly well established quite early on, I believe, that the bullet had actually missed the President's heart by 1 inch or so, and that there had been no damage to his heart, but that the damage was to his lung. Michael Reagan, who is the President's oldest son,